Well, we have a quorum, so good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the June 24th, 2021 edition of the South Bay COG Board of Directors meeting. And we have verified the quorum.
Yes.
Can we confirm the posting of the agenda?
Yes, we can. It was posted. Yes.
And are there any changes to the agenda?
We want to add 2 items right after the consent calendar. And those items are we just received the Water Replenishment District contract, which will be paying the COG $5,000 a month through December 31st of 2022. It's exactly the same contract we currently have. This is a contract extension. So we'd like to add that to the agenda because our contract expires with them this month. And then we also would like to add 2 pieces of legislation: support for SB 619 and oppose AB 215, which I can explain. So I would need a motion to add those to the agenda.
So moved.
All right, so
Second.
thank you. May we have a reverse roll call, please?
Any opposition to adding the 2 items to the consent or to the agenda? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
All right, are there public comments?
Yes, we have 1 public comment, and the person cannot come today, but I said I would read it. It's from Grace Ping, who's a member of the community. I can't remember what city. She wanted to talk to you today about redistricting of the LA County supervisorial districts. And what she said, and I'll read her comment here, if I can get this done, is the current district boundaries dilute voting power for the South Bay, both power and representation. In particular, the LA Air Force Base and the aerospace industries are in El Segundo and Hawthorne, which is split between 2 supervisors. The Asian American communities of Gardena and Torrance are split. The Latino communities of Lawndale and Hawthorne are split. I don't know if that's true, are they? I thought Lawndale and Hawthorne were both in Mitchell's district. But anyway, okay, we would be better served by having the COG sub-region represented by 1 supervisor who deeply understands our region. And that is a comment from Grace Ping.
I'm going to refer that to the steering committee for consideration at the next steering committee meeting. So I think we'll follow that route. It's a worthy discussion. So I think it deserves a lot of time and attention.
Thank you. That's good.
All right. Next is the consent calendar. Hopefully you've had a chance to read the consent calendar. May I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
And that was, who made the motion?
That was
Cedric.
And may I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. May we have a reverse roll call on the consent calendar?
Any opposition to approving the consent calendar? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll, Jackie, go ahead, please, and address the contract for the water replenishment district.
Okay, I think that we have both of them in the chat. As I said, the Water Replenishment District contract is an extension of our current contract that would be, and unfortunately it did not arrive in time for the steering committee to look at it, but it's $5,000 a month, which is the current rate till December 31st of 2022. So I would ask for your approval.
All right, may I have a motion to approve the contract extension for the Water Replenishment District?
So moved. Armato.
Thank you. And second?
second. Horvath.
Thank you. May we have a reverse roll call on that?
Any opposition to approving the WRD contract? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
All right, so now is the discussion on the supporting of SB 619. Jackie?
Right. David, do you want to explain SB 619 and AB 215?
Sure. SB 619 would delay by 1 year the the penalties from SB 1383 implementation, the organic waste. So this would give you until 2023 before any penalties are actually levied. And then
Wait, we actually had a meeting with Carson. Kim and I met with Carson staff about SB 1383. It is extremely complicated. And they were saying that they, getting ready by January of 2022 is going to be a challenge. So we're probably going to set up a meeting of the COG to meet with all of the cities and find out what the challenges are. And that's one reason I put this on the agenda, because having another year before penalties come in, I think is going to be very important.
And then AB 215 was another action alert from the league. That bill would it would change an incentive-based housing program that was created as part of the 2019 budget trailer bill. It created the California Pro Housing Designation Program, which if a jurisdiction was deemed by HDD to be pro-housing, they got additional points in certain funding programs like the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, things like that. This bill would replace it with a state mandate for cities that are experiencing a lack of housing production compared to the regional average, and that those experiencing what they call low progress at the midpoint of the RENA cycle are then forced to consult with HCD to adopt pro-housing policies, whether or not any of those lead to more housing or appropriate for your communities, are supported by your communities. And so it's another bait and switch and removal of local control and incentives. So the league is opposed to this bill, and we're recommending an opposed position also.
Thank you. So at this time, I will entertain V has a question. V, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in favor of delaying the penalties on SB 619, but given Jackie's comments that there's a lot of permutations and additional complications that would make it difficult even to comply by 2022, do we bind ourselves by saying we approve this, that we're definitely going to have to get ready by 2022? Would it not be better
Agreed.
to stay neutral on that if it's going to be something that will be used against us if for some reason we want a further extension?
The bill, right, the law right now says you're going to be penalized by 2022. So if you stay neutral, then you're really, the current law is going to start imposing penalties if you're not ready. What this does, I guess I'm not sure I'm getting what you're saying, because what this does is it says you still have to get ready, but they won't start providing imposing penalties for another year. It's an extension of when they'll impose the penalty.
Okay,
And
maybe I misunderstood your comments, but are you saying it still may be difficult, even with the extension, to be ready such that we would be asking for an additional extension? Does that cause
I don't know
us
that
to
that's true. I don't know that you,
Okay.
I mean, I think that if you had a good year, I mean, right now you don't have a year, you have 6 months. So I think if you had a year and a half, that would help.
Okay, so we're not hindering ourselves from being able to ask for an additional extension if we need one. I
Wouldn't
mean,
think so.
And we could put something like that in the position letter too, that we would request consideration of future extensions if needed. I mean, I think COVID was really what delayed all of the 2022 deadline. So without knowing what the future holds over the next year and a half, the legislature might be willing anyway. So
as long as we have some kind of language that we'll then review and see what the compliance conditions are, and if needed, there may be a request for additional extension, but at this point we do need a further extension, or hoping to, this will be sufficient, something like that. So we're hedging our bets, and we're not saying we're definitely going to comply by the extension date. Okay.
Okay, Steve has a question.
And there are no additional strings attached by virtue of granting the extension?
No, I
Not
think
to-
it's a straight extension.
Just want to be sure.
Thank you. At this time, I will entertain a motion to support SB 619 and oppose AB 215.
So moved.
Wells, second.
Thank you. May we have a reverse roll call on that?
Any opposition to taking the stated positions? Any abstentions
Yes, I will, David.
on both of them?
Yes.
David, this is Sonia. I will abstain as well.
Okay.
All right, so
Thank you.
we're ready for our presentations. And Jackie, I believe you're going to introduce our speakers.
Oh, okay. I am extremely impressed by what the county is doing in their Human Resources Department to work on employee workplace issues and telework and how they're handling it. The county was also always very interested in this before COVID. They were looking at WeWork installations and actually had rented at least space with WeWork. But since COVID, they've, you'll hear in the presentation probably how much telework has gone on and how they're going to try to sustain this in very creative ways. I thought it was really important. I heard a presentation. I thought it was important that you all heard about the innovations that they're coming up with and how they're not only going to save vehicle miles traveled, but dollars. It was very impressive. So we have two speakers today from Human Resources Department of LA County, Emily Williams, who's the lead strategist for Telework and Workplace of the Future initiatives, and Keisha McCullough, who is a senior human resources manager. And they both bring a lot of experience to this. And I think without further ado, I will introduce them and have them give their presentation.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Jackie. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, good afternoon or good evening. I'm Keisha McCullough, as Jackie just mentioned. I will be sharing, both myself and Emily Williams will be sharing our presentation on the county's telework program this afternoon, and wanted to just get right into it and with our introduction. Next slide, please, Emily. And then we'll move on to the next slide. Just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the county's telework program and to provide some insight about where we are today. So just to look, as we're looking at the slide on the screen, in 1989, the Board of Supervisors adopted a countywide telework policy as a means to achieve the county's clean air and traffic reduction goals. The criteria for teleworking assumed that an employee's commute would be eliminated or reduced by at least 50%. Although the program has continued to evolve and expand, the focus remained on reducing the county's carbon emissions and achieving the vehicle reduction targets set by Air Quality Management District, or otherwise known as AQMD. In 2016, oversight of the telework program transferred from the Chief Executive Office to the Department of Human Resources, resulting in new trainings for employees and managers, a new program manual, and updated view on what telework can mean to our workplace. Next slide. So today's telework program at the county focuses on focus on the board and integration of telework in regular county operations. Since 2018, the board authored 5 motions directing DHR to expand or study telework usage. In addition to that, telework has become viewed as a critical tool to support the continuity of county operations during emergencies or harsh weather events. Specifically in 2020, the county transitioned from approximately just 5,000 teleready employees to having more than 45,800 employees actively teleworking. That at our peak, we actually reached over 44% of our workforce for the County of Los Angeles. At the height of this pandemic, almost half of the county, again, just as I said, teleworked in some capacity. So just to wrap that into what it means today, telework is obviously globally perceived as a critical component of any competitive employer's business operation. Next slide, please, Emily. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Emily Williams, who will show you and demonstrate some of our telework data.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. The Department of Human Resources for the County of Los Angeles rigorously tracks and has tracked telework stats using timesheet data. Now, as you see on this slide, before the pandemic, completion of telework training, which was required in order for people to become teleworkers, was pretty low. So if we look at 2019, you had about 594, just under 600 people completing the training. This chart shows the trend in online telework training completions per month from January 2019 until mid-March of this year. Note the dramatic increase in March 2020, which of course we understand was spiking at the same time that the state and the county both released their stay-at-home and safer-at-home orders, respectively. On this next slide, you see what happens in early 2020 versus mid-2020 as the rate of telework-ready and teleworker employees increases and the rate of traditional or routine on-site workers decreases. On this next slide, what we do, as I said, we track the data based on timesheets. This is the most recent data that we have. It's for the pay period May 16th through May 31st, 2021. And every department here is listed. The blue line depicts the percentage of the workforce within that department that is teleworking. The red line shows what the county average is. So you'll see that there are certain departments which would be expected, Sheriff's Department, the District Attorney, the Museum of Natural History, places where the positions are often interacting with the public or are required to come to work more frequently. As we go to the right end of the spectrum and we see the departments that are working, they've got up to, this is regional planning, which has 96% of its workforce teleworking, much higher than the average. Department of Regional Planning was prescient in its ability to transform its public in-person counter to a virtual counter. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the impacts we've seen as a result of that conversion. I wanted to mention that during that last pay period, just to give you some examples, when we talk about employees who are teleworking, we're not talking about employees who are teleworking full-time. They can be teleworking as little as 1 day per pay period or as much as the entire pay period. And so for the pay period May 16th through 31st, 38% of the workforce was teleworking. And of those teleworkers, 17.8% teleworked 80 or more hours, 52.9% teleworked between 40 and 80 hours, and 29.3% teleworked fewer than 40 hours. So the average county teleworker was teleworking for 52.6 hours of the pay period, which is still a majority of the pay period. As a comparison, just 2 months ago, the average county teleworker was teleworking for 60.8 hours of the pay period. So it's dropped 8 hours per pay period on average just in the last 2 months, and that's due to the reopening of certain county operations and services. So our libraries are now open, our museums are now open, our parks are open, and our beaches are open. So more people are coming to work and not teleworking. What this chart shows is 1 full year of data, which we're really excited to have, because it shows what the impact of the pandemic has been on the ability to telework. Whereas we had 5,500 people back in early 2020 who were either telework ready or teleworking, you can see some of these departments now have more than 50% of their workforce teleworking. The way I like to liken, the closest thing I can think of to compare telework to is what the workforce looked like pre-World War II. The workforce was less than 25% female. And after World War II, after women had gone to work in factories and other places, when men came back from fighting, women refused to go back home. And ever since then, we've had almost parity in the workforce as a result of that. The workforce did not go back to normal. This workforce will not either. And it's my prediction that there is a child that is being born somewhere who will come up to you in 20 years and say, did you really sit in traffic for an hour going to work and an hour going home and show up to work every single day? And you will say, yes. And that child will say, why? Why didn't you just say I'll work from home? And you will say, because I would have been fired. And that will be absolutely unbelievable. Just as unbelievable as it would be for us to tell our daughters today, don't prepare to go to work. Just prepare to stay at home and don't even entertain ideas of going into the workforce. So that's what this is going to be like. In 20 years, it's going to be unrecognizable from what it looked like in early 2020. So on this next slide, we talk more about the future of telework. And this is actually a part of the LA County Strategic Plan goal number 3, which is realize tomorrow's government today. So on this slide, what we created to help employees and help departments understand what telework would look like in the future, we created something called the Hybrid Virtual Continuum. Because the county believes in using telework as a tool to promote operational efficiencies, support employee recruitment, retention, and engagement, and fulfill its responsibility to reduce its carbon footprint, it is very important for us to not return to the way things were before the pandemic. So this spectrum, called the Hybrid Virtual Continuum, shows on the far left where it says fully on-site. These are employers who require everyone to come into work every day. And that's pretty much where many county departments were pre-March 2020. As we move to the right of the spectrum, we get closer to the other end, where it says fully teleworking, where all employees are working remotely 100% of the time. We do not expect that that is how the county will ever look. There may be certain units that work 100% of the time teleworking, but the majority of the people will be working in some kind of hybrid model. So as we open up, county departments are finding themselves somewhere in the middle with a hybrid mix of telework and on-site work. For example, the Department of Human Resources, which has just under 500 employees, will be implementing a phased-in approach to return a very small number of people to the office full-time. The vast majority of Department of Human Resources employees will telework 1 to 4 days a week. This places DHR in box number 5, which is mostly off-site with limited co-working space. The Department of Human Resources, in fact, has pledged to not lay off or furlough any employees, but to actually give up real estate. And so beginning in July, there will not be almost 500 spaces for us to work out of. There will be about 200, and we will be asked to make a compromise and work from home 3 to 4 days a week and come in 1 to 2 days a week. And each manager is given the autonomy to work with their employees to determine what days they're coming in, what days are best for collaboration. And then we use a hoteling app the night before to select our desk. We can select a standing or sitting desk. We can select large size monitors or small ones, by a window, not by a window, an office or a cubicle. And we can also reserve conference rooms that way, as well as parking. So it'll be very interesting to see when we go back to work what that looks like. But many departments are planning to do the same thing. In fact, 40% of county departments have said that 90 to 100% of their employees will be teleworking into the future. That is a huge leap for the county to make. And as such, it brings other things with it. So this is another type of spectrum, and I have called it measurable impacts. Just as we move to the right of the hybrid virtual spectrum, we see some big savings and some changes as we move to the right of this measurable impacts graphic. So first of all, we'll start with real estate costs. According to the Chief Executive Office's latest report on its space management initiative, the county during the pandemic has realized cost savings of nearly $3 million and cost avoidance of more than $17 million, totaling more than $20 million in saved costs due to giving up leases and consolidating leased space. The county's internal services department tracks carbon emissions. And the internal services department has determined that county employees have saved 200 million miles by not commuting to work from April 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021. That's our year of data. This translates into 85,204 metric tons of carbon emissions that were not released into the atmosphere. When it comes to personnel, those 211 million commuter miles saved by teleworkers translates into nearly 7.3 million hours saved by not hitting the road to go to and from work. When we talk about other personnel-related cost savings, preliminary analysis reveals that EEO and county policy of equity complaints have tracked downward in the last year by as much as 35 to 55%, depending on the department. And the Department of Human Resources has been tracking its absenteeism rates among employees and has found a 27.7% decrease in total leave used in calendar year 2019 versus calendar year 2020. If the scope is narrowed to the use of sick leave, the decrease is more than 40%. And that makes sense because probably every single one of us has felt a little under the weather. And if we had to drive the 20, 30 or more miles to work, we might not go, we might call in sick. But if we know we've got to check into a couple meetings and maybe we can turn our cameras off for several of those meetings, then we might just go ahead and keep working. And that reduces costs for your municipality and certainly for the county. When it comes to supplies and equipment, we have anecdotal information about reduced costs, less frequent ordering of supplies, fewer reams of paper saved. But we're still in the process of trying to find a way to track this countywide. And when we see other here, this is where I'm going to talk about the Department of Regional Planning and what they did. By moving to a virtual counter, they saw an increase in revenue from calendar year 2019, $17 million in revenue to $40 million in revenue in calendar year 2020. And that was because we did see an uptick with home construction and home improvement. But it means that if you are driving to an appointment at the public counter and you show up for your appointment and you say, here are my forms, and they say, oh, you forgot this form. What you've got to do now is reschedule that meeting and you've got to drive all the way home and you've got to get that form. Now with a virtual meeting, you go, hold on, give me a minute. I'm going to look in my files here. Is this the form you're looking for? And it's a much more pleasant experience for people being able to be at home or be at their place of work and have a virtual meeting anyway. So it's 135% revenue increase just for the Department of Regional Planning. I'll now turn it back over to Keisha, who will talk about Telework Innovation.
Thank you, Emily. So as the county is transitioning from emergency telework to routine telework, we thought it would be helpful to introduce a framework that informs routine telework as we prepare to emerge from the pandemic and transition to the new normal of business operations. So as you can see on the screen, we created 5 categories of telework innovation. We can be future focused as we design the workplace of the future, and telework will be as I mentioned before, an essential tool to achieving the countywide goal. So as we look at the categories above, number 1 being, telework continuity plans, or otherwise known as emergency plans, which incorporates emergency and routine telework where appropriate into ongoing business operations. So that means that if in the future there is, God forbid, another pandemic or some other natural disaster, we would have emergency telework as part of our emergency continuity plans. Category number 2 focuses on the specifics of business operations, which Emily just spoke about. Category 3 talks about organizational and countywide measurements, which we'll get into in just a few seconds. And category 4 emphasizes internal and external communications, including workforce measurements, and public outreach. Category 5 addresses managing and supervising in a hybrid virtual work environment. I'll pass it back over to Emily to discuss categories 1 through 3.
Thank you. So for category 1, which is continuity plans and operations, although we're all focused on emerging from the pandemic, it's important to ensure that your city is telework ready should future emergencies arise. The Department of Human Resources advises every county department to include emergency telework protocols, which the Department of Human Resources created and released last December during the surge as part of their continuity of operations plan. And I do want to say that as I mention these documents, we are more than happy to share these documents with you in case any of your cities are looking to create emergency telework protocols so that you're ready should another emergency come up to be able to flip immediately into emergency telework from routine telework. Routine telework operations or options should also be integrated into the creation of virtual new hire and onboarding processes and updated department materials. So Keisha and I are constantly working with our policy division to update policies that are internal to DHR and also countywide, as well as update our telework training manual and our telework training website and telework training in general. County employees are also required to enroll in telework training, which was not required for emergency telework, but is required for routine telework should they want to continue when we open up. The second category is really about integrating telework into your business plan. So earlier this year, all county departments were required to submit a reconstitution plan to the Chief Executive Office outlining how they would be reopening and when they would be reopening once it was safe to do so. Part of that reconstitution plan was the telework plan for their employees. Last August, the Department of Human Resources sent out a classification survey asking departments for the number of budgeted positions for which assignments could be conducted via telework full-time, part-time, or not at all. And as I mentioned, 40% of our departments said that 90 to 100% of their employees would be compatible with part-time or full-time telework. As I already showed you, we have the hybrid virtual spectrum, which shows that just because people are teleworking, it doesn't mean they're teleworking full-time. And for category 3, which was the business metrics, we also already talked about what some of those measurable impacts are throughout the county. So I'll turn it back over to Keisha.
Excuse me, at this point, I'm going to ask you, we only have a few minutes left, and I would ask you if you would leave the rest of your time for questions.
Sure.
Sure. Did you want to? Great. Yeah, I know that one of the things we were asked to talk about was managing remotely, and that's what Keisha was going to get into. But if there are no questions about that, we won't talk about it. If there is a question about it, we're happy to answer it. And that's pretty much it. We just had, we distributed a pulse survey through Jackie. So I wasn't sure, Jackie, if you had some, an update on that.
No, did you get the results or did I get the results?
No, they would have come into us automatically as soon as you distributed the survey and they took.
Yeah, no. So I did distribute the survey. But...
Okay, so then we haven't had any responses yet. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're happy to take questions.
Thank you. And I see we do have a question from Mr. Councilman Zuckerman.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-part. Did it require equipment purchases for the employees so that you could standardize what they have or help them if they needed it? And did it require considerable increases in your IT staffing?
Great. So we can go ahead and answer the first part. So the county has about 37 departments, all ranging in size from anywhere from 35 employees to almost 15,000 employees. So when you ask about equipment, there were some departments that couldn't afford to provide equipment to their employees. Some of the very kind of generous and forward-thinking departments actually allowed employees to take their equipment home with them and sign it out. So for example, if you can imagine with Department of Regional Planning and Public Works, you've got Esri, which you're not going to ask your employees to pay for at home. And if they've got to do GPS mapping, then they need to have their large monitors at home with them. And so in that case, the department provided the equipment. Departments tried to purchase laptops as quickly as possible and then provide that equipment to employees. But there are many employees who had to use their own personal equipment. And then they had one of 4 ways that they could log into the county's VPN so that they could work from home. And then when you ask the question about increasing IT staff, we have an entire department, the Internal Services Department, that serves as IT staff for many departments, but some of the larger ones have their own internal IT staff. In terms of ISD, Keisha, I'm not sure if you can answer whether or not there was an increase in staffing there. We're not aware of one, or at least I'm not. The biggest increase in staffing we're aware of was at the Department of Public Health, which increased their staff by 25% over the last year.
Right, Emily, and I'll just piggyback with regards to internal services. To my knowledge, most of those staff members pivoted to emergency telework tasks or projects. There wasn't a large increase or uptick in classifications that grew, but I think for the most part, employees or departments were focused on staying steady with regards to their staffing because of the decrease in budget that was happening during the pandemic. So watching those dollars, including staffing, was of the utmost critical importance. So I wouldn't say that there was an enormous uptick in staffing.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
I have a chat question for you. Can you speak about managing workers remotely, challenges, unexpected results, new metrics for success that may have developed?
Sure, I can take that question. So as a whole, this question comes up quite often. We understand that managing remotely can pose challenges. We find that managers have concern around productivity and accountability often, and generally we remind leaders to focus on the same outcome-based measurements that they had while employees were in the office as they would out working remotely. So it's important to not recreate the wheel or create new metrics that didn't apply to employees while they were in the office, especially because you have a portion of the staff who remain in the offices or at the work location. And you want to be mindful of equity issues there so that people who are working remotely don't feel as though they're being sort of pinpointed or partially viewed because they are working remotely. So reestablishing what their expectations are and creating an environment of accountability is really important for all employees, especially those who are working remotely. And then creating an environment that helps to bridge both groups so that one doesn't feel that the other is sort of has the advantage. And then also one of the things to help with engagement that you can do is just to help those that are teleworking overcome workflow challenges that may bog them down. Sometimes people end up working in silos because they have to work outside of the office place and may feel isolated. So helping to bridge that gap for the workflow is important. And just in terms of helping them with the tools that they need, we talked about technology. All of those components really help to make a successful remote worker.
Are there other questions? Yes, Jackie, you have a question? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I know you have this hoteling option, which I wanted to confirm did not mean that you would necessarily come to your home office, but could come to almost many different county facilities. That was my understanding. And also, what if you don't want to work at home? How do you handle people like that want to not go into the office, but not work at home?
Yeah, so DHR conducted a survey actually towards the beginning of this year, asking its employees, is there anybody who does not want to work from home? You do want to come into the office every day. And there were between 20 and 30 employees who said yes, for whatever, for many different reasons, they were not able to work from home. And so DHR made sure to have a dedicated workspace for each of those employees so that they wouldn't feel forced to work from home. And then the other part of your question about hoteling, I did put a response in the chat. Aaron Baum asked me a question about the hoteling software. So I put the name of the software that DHR is using. And that is for coming to each department runs its own hoteling services right now. So for example, county council, they have space and anybody from county council can use a hoteling tool. They use a different kind of software than they do. I think they develop their own to come in. What we would ideally like to move towards is having multiple county assets where any employee from any department could come in and use that as a hoteling space, because oftentimes all you need is a copier, you need a printer, you need a docking station to plug your laptop in so that you have a bigger monitor to use, and you might also need a conference room. And so it doesn't have to be a particular department that hosts that.
It turns out that I was on the phone today with somebody from Supervisor Hahn's office, and she said that there was a building in Downey that was going to be for 3 different departments, and it now will not be for 3 different departments. It will be for a county facility that people will be able to use if they live close to that area. So do you see those kinds of things happening?
That's exactly what we're trying to move towards.
Yeah, thank you.
I have another chat question. What will happen with all the county real estate and office square footage in light of telework?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
What will happen with all the county real estate and office square footage in light of telework?
It's a great question.
Right.
So if it's leased, we give it up, which is a cost savings to the county. If it's not leased and it's county owned, then there is a priority to move departments that are heavily NCC funded, which we refer to as the general fund. Anything that's general funded, we're trying to move them into county owned space so that departments that are subvened or that pull funding from federal or state or other sources, they can continue to lease because it's not as much of a burden on the county's budget.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Kristen Horvath.
Councilmember Horvath.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. It's kind of refreshing to hear it, especially because the COG has really been talking about telework for a long time, and it took a pandemic for everybody to kind of wake up. But you did mention that you had, what would be great is, I mean, all our cities have kind of figured this out on the fly, much like you guys, but I don't think we've been able to extrapolate the data or put together best practices and do it to the extent that maybe you guys have, especially as it relates to what your planning department did. And so I'm just curious if you're able, you did say earlier you can share some information with us. It'd be great for us to take anything that you think would be beneficial that could be applied to the smaller jurisdictions for either, you know, a hybrid model going forward, and or to the point you made, an emergency model again, you know. So if you are so willing to share any of that, I think it would be great for each of our members to be able to take that back to our staffs.
Absolutely. We can either put together a packet, or we can, you know, we can start by sharing our latest quarterly report to the Board of Supervisors. So we really have to thank Supervisor Janice Hahn, who has been the visionary on the Board of Supervisors for seeing how important telework would be. She introduced her first motion on telework and alternative schedules in December of 2018, well before the pandemic, trying to get the county to move in that direction. And she introduced several more motions, including one in December 2019, which now inspires a quarterly report that the Department of Human Resources writes. And it tracks all of these stats. It talks about some of the things that we're developing for the future. And I think starting with that quarterly report would probably be a great thing to take a look at. And then in the PowerPoint on the last slide, I can share it again. You've got my contact information and Keisha's contact information. And if you'd like to do a deep dive into any of the subjects or topics that you see in the quarterly report, let us know. We will amass the documents that you need. We will disseminate them to whomever needs them.
You can send me the quarterly.
Awesome. And one quick follow-up question to Drew's question in the chat. Is there or has there been any discussion about some of the county properties that are owned where you may not need to consolidate employees being used for emergency housing, or thinking about that, considering that's also a goal of the county? Just curious.
Yes, so as you probably know, I know that Downey was mentioned. Los Padrinos, which is closed down. I believe that Supervisor Hahn has that targeted for affordable housing, if I'm not mistaken. We now have, 9 or more probation camps that are closed. I am huge just a huge advocate of ground leasing some of those facilities and converting that into the things that we need most. Of course, housing would be one of them, but there are many other things that we could certainly use some of those properties for. And then I'm aware of Supervisor Solis working with the city of El Monte, I believe, to take the former DCFS facility, McLaren Hall, and turning that into affordable housing as well as public space. One of the hardest things I think to get a hold of within the county is a comprehensive list of every single real estate asset and whether or not it is being fully utilized, underutilized, or not utilized at all. If any of you have any luck getting that list, let us know. It's even hard to get that internally in the county, but what I'm excited about is with the reduction of our real estate footprint, it does certainly open up a lot of opportunities.
Great. Thanks so much, Emily and Keisha.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? And again, my thanks to Emily Williams and Keisha McCullough. Thank you so much for coming and giving us this valuable presentation.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So next we have a presentation on Service Planning Area 8, an update, the community health workers and reopening. And it's Dr. Sylvia Prieto, who serves as the Regional Health Officer for Service Planning Areas 7 and 8, which encompass the southern and the eastern portions of Los Angeles County and serve approximately 3 million residents. Dr. Prieto's vision is to work towards safe, healthy, and equitable communities for all residents by partnering with communities, schools, businesses, community-based organizations, and governmental agencies. Dr. Prieto obtained her medical degree from UCLA School of Medicine and her Master in Public Health degree from UCLA School of Public Health. During her 29 years with Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, she has served as Area Medical Director, Director of Child Health and Disability Prevention Programs, and Director of Binational Border Health Programs. Dr. Prieto, thank you for joining us.
You can't hear.
Dr. Prieto?
Hello? We can't hear
Hello?
anything.
It's definitely on. I think she might be having some technical difficulties.
Okay. Can she call in or something?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to return to share with you more about the Department of Public Health and how we can partner and work together. As was stated, I'm Dr. Sylvia Prieto, and I'm being joined today by Nancy Rodriguez, who I will introduce in a little bit. Next slide, please. So in 2018, our director, Dr. Ferrer, had the vision of that we would like to expand the number. Oh, sorry. Are we going to start there, Nancy? Or are we going to give just a quick? So I just wanted to give a brief update. Great. I just wanted to give a brief update on the reopening. I'm sure all of you are aware. And to remind you that our revised public health order is posted on our website. The most important thing, the takeaway is that there is still masking guidelines that are in alignment with the state. And we continue to urge everyone, especially those who cannot or are not vaccinated against COVID-19, sometimes because of age or because of other medical issues, to continue to exercise caution and to use good judgment, such as physical distancing and limiting the capacities are removed. And so you can view any more, if you have any questions, you can view it on our website. Next. So in 2018, our director, Dr. Ferrer, had a vision of bringing on additional workers, community health workers, who, as they're called, to join our department. And so she worked with the CEO and was able to get 5 community health workers for each regional health office. And the vision was that these community health workers would help to extend our capacity to provide outreach and education to as frontline public health workers with a close understanding of the communities that they serve, and therefore be able to hopefully get the community to, like in COVID, to get them to get vaccinated. And these community health workers serve as a liaison between health and social services and the community to facilitate access to services, because that is one of the things that we teach them, where to find the services, and to improve the quality and cultural competency of all these services. And so now I'd like to turn it over to Nancy Rodriguez, the health program analyst. She supervises some of the community health workers, and she can share a little bit more about their training and their role.
And so in 2018, when we onboarded these community health workers, we knew that they already had the lived experience, but they really needed some skills training to ensure that they were ready to go out into the field and to speak to community members. So they underwent a training of over 30 modules that addressed everything from effective communication, outreach skills building. They also addressed specific public health topics such as STD prevention, nutrition, chronic disease prevention, and substance use disorder. And they also underwent a multiple day mental health training. The trainings were really focused on giving the community health workers an introduction to various health topics that would prepare them to provide resources and information to the public. And this is an ongoing process. Community health workers continue their professional development. They participate in trainings all the time. And it's really just to increase their knowledge about health and social services, but also about the resources available so that they can effectively connect community members and support them in both public health and social service issues. And so the role of the community health worker is really to provide cultural mediation between communities and the healthcare and social service system, to provide culturally appropriate and accessible health education and information, to assure that community members have access to the services that they need, to provide informal counseling and social support. They also advocate for individual and community needs. They provide direct services when they're out in the field. And they're really, the overall goal is to build individual and community capacity. And so some examples of the outreaches that our community health workers in SPA 8 have done include flea-borne typhus, West Nile virus, measles, hands-only CPR, sentence and public charge, flu vaccine. They were instrumental in our COVID-19 prevention and vaccine outreach. And they also do, in normal times, they attend a lot of outreach health fairs and community events. And the goal is really to have them out in the community and talking to community members, talking to business owners, so that we really have a direct link to the community as part of public health field workers. And another example of the way that community health workers have been essential is oftentimes they're pulled to other regions that they may not primarily work in. So for example, our community health workers participated in Excite door-to-door outreach, which was an effort to support residents in the communities that were affected by the release of hazardous materials from Excite Technologies. So it's not uncommon that our community health workers are deployed across the county when the need arises. In the example of COVID, a lot of them were going to our vaccine pods in all areas of the county. So there really are our boots on the ground that support our public health efforts in a more direct way. And we really just wanted to bring you all highlight the community health workers as an essential part of our team, because they do provide that direct, culturally and linguistically relevant public health education. Although we do continue traditional public health outreach efforts through our elected officials, through our cities and community partners, our community health workers are really the boots on the ground, and they've allowed us to reach community members directly and ensure that our messaging is received by the communities that we serve. And we'll answer any questions that the COG may have.
Are there questions?
Yes, I have one.
Councilmember Chin?
Yes, so thank you. I think having you speak to us came at a time during the COVID-19 pandemic. As we go on, thank goodness we're getting out of it. Should an incident similar to this occur, are these community health workers, how is there a way to basically represent us almost like our SPA 8 health department with health orders uniquely to our area?
Yeah, again, so we first of all have to follow the orders that come from the state. So we are always in alignment, and then our director, Dr. Ferrer, is also in communication with the Board of Supervisors to ensure that we are following their directives too. Unfortunately, the community health workers would not make a difference on being able to in any way change that. So again, we're all under, anybody in LA County is still under the LA County Health Officer, Dr. Davis.
Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question, but I was hoping that we could work a little bit to change the process because I already know that answer. That's why.
Are there any other questions? Comments?
We will be discussing later the SPA 8 working group, and you might pick up this discussion when we get there.
Thank you, Dr. Prieto. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez, for joining us and giving us this valuable information. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have our transportation reports. First, from the Metro report.
Jim Butts is here, but Steve Lance also has a report, can also give the report. I don't know if Steve, you want to start, and then Jim, you can add.
To Jim, I'll do that if you'd like. I have to get my my notes up though. At today's board meeting, there was an item that was the most discussed, I think, and debated. And it had to do with the, hang on, let me not do this. Let me find it and get back to me. Okay, let's do it out of order.
All right. So let's do the Transportation Committee report first then. Councilmember Horvath?
I have a 20-minute report on the fact that we did not have a meeting.
Damn.
So I kick it back to you, Steve.
Yeah. Come on, you got 19 more minutes.
Great. Let me tell you what I did during the Transportation Committee report.
Okay, back to me. I got it now. Sorry for the delay, folks. Okay, so the major item on today's board meeting was called Modernizing the Metro Highway Program. As you all know, we've had a Metro Highway Program that's been very constrained to capital projects that were highway-related projects to improve the operation of streets and roads and freeways, et cetera. This motion has been worked on for the last couple of years. And what they have come up with, what we've come up with at the board, were 3 pillars that changed the highway program fairly significantly. The changes are number 1, that active transportation, transit, and TDM projects that reduce vehicle miles traveled must be eligible either as ancillary elements of highway projects or as standalone projects for Measure R and Measure M highway funds, sub-regional highway funds in particular. Number two, that using Measure R or M sub-regional highway funds for active transportation, transit capital, or TDM projects must be at the discretion of the sub-regional COGs. For the first time, it's clear in the board policy that was adopted today that we at the COG are going to select these projects. Metro is not going to impose projects on us, either at the staff or the policy board level. Number three, that the policies that allow use of Measure R or M sub-regional highway funds for the active transportation, transit capital, or TDM projects are permissive, meaning we do not have to use those funds for non-traditional highway projects if we don't want to. It's really up to the COG to decide whether they want to continue to use the funds for traditional highway projects, or they want to broaden them and use them for these other three uses. The policies that allow this to happen preclude Metro staff or the board from establishing mandatory uses. So really, it clarifies the fact that it's up to the COG henceforward on our Measure R South Bay Highway program and on our Measure M MSP programs, the three MSP programs, to decide what we want to do with these funds. And the eligibility for these funds has been broadened by board action. And they're going to come back in September and add some additional clarity to several issues that were brought up. But at least for today, it was a big win for the South Bay. The other thing that happened was that there was a specific provision put in there that benefits us. In our broadband program, if you remember, there was a question as to whether we could simply do the fiber optic cable or whether we could do applications, whether we could do software. And Mike Bulkey and I were able to get a provision added to the board policy that says transportation infrastructure in a public right-of-way that supports the implementation of TDM strategies, including associated software, licensing, and related one-time support costs to the maximum extent permitted by Measure R or Measure M ordinances. So again, it broadened the opportunity for us to decide how we want to use these programs. And as an example, now that we have the fiber optic network pretty well built, we can start addressing issues like what software do we want to run through it? What kind of programs do we want to run through it? And those software programs would be eligible for the reimbursement from Measure R or from M. They're supposed to report back in September the results of all 19 adopted modernization actions. This was just a very narrow action to get started and to make it clear that the control on the project is now shifted from Metro staff to the sub-regional COGs. I think that's it as the major issue that was addressed today at the board.
Thank you. Does Mayor Boyles have a question?
Mayor Butts?
Or Mayor Butts, does Mayor Butts have any addition to this before we call on Mayor Boyles? No comment? All right, go ahead, Mayor Boyles.
Well, I was going to thank Jim because I'm assuming he had a big part in this, and says the first thing. And I wanted to know if that changes our priorities at all in terms of the list of projects that we have, or if we have yet to digest this new information, and then how do we?
I think it changes the way that we approach the next annual call for projects. Okay. I think that we have existing projects that we have committed to, and this wouldn't change our current commitments to any current project. It just broadens the eligibility for future funds. Remember, Measure R money is available in chunks all the way up to 2039. Measure M programs are year by year. So the amount of money that's available within these two programs is considerably different on an annual basis. So there's an opportunity for us to do new things. And when we start working with your public works directors and your other staff to develop the new projects, we can have a broader brush that we can use. And I need to thank Jim Butts for being the lead on this. He actually authored the motion. And I need to also thank Mike Balke, who carried a lot of the political action that was needed to get this done.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Are there any other further questions for Steve or comments? Christian, is that your hand up?
Yep. So quick, Steve. So with the policy change, do we anticipate, based on what I just heard you say, that as we go into the next round of funding and projects for cities this fall, that they will be eligible for the more flexible programming as you described?
I believe so.
Okay.
And I think when we put out the guidelines or the instructions for creation of applications to be considered, remember, we do this over the summer and in the fall, and we select the projects by about February so Metro can improve them before July.
Great, but is it safe to say that you're going to give all public works directors a head up?
Oh, sure,
heads up early on, so that they can consider that as they're trying to put together future projects?
Yeah, and I think there will be in the first year or two, like there was in the original program, there will be questions and there will be discussions that may even need further board clarification. So having an idea over the summer what we want to do with it, or what the ideas are at least, would allow us to pre-test it with Metro staff and make sure we don't have to go back to the board and avoid delays and things like that.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so next we have the South Bay COG program, action items, reports, and updates. Jackie?
Okay, yes, at the last meeting, we talked, I presented a draft work program, and there was concern that there was not enough time to talk about it. So there was this idea of having a special meeting. And Drew, I don't know if you want to talk about what we're going to do. Drew, I had a meeting with Drew. We talked about how to address the work program. And do you want me to do this, or do you want to do this?
No, I don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you. The idea was this came up with the steering committee rather than default to what staff would continue with in the work order. Instead, maybe have a strategic planning session of sorts in August. So I've lined up a facilitator, someone that I've worked with closely in the past, to lead a strategic planning session. And then from that, there would be things like a start, stop, and continue exercise. What do we want to continue doing on the COG? What should we start doing on the COG, or at least consider exploring? And what should we maybe consider stop doing on the COG? And then from those, get some strategic priorities, ideally with metrics associated with them, so that we know that we're actually moving the ball forward. And then those would direct the work order for the staff for the next probably 1 to 3 years, ideally 3 years, so we don't have to do it so often, but it could be done annually. So that was the idea that I discussed with Jackie, and that came up with the steering committee as well.
And the thought was that it would be happening at the August 9th steering committee meeting. We would go an hour longer on the steering committee, and most of the items would be on the consent calendar, and then we'd have the meeting at that time. So if you could save that time, I will probably be sending a save the date out in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Jackie. Next is the legislative visits and advocacy.
I had a quick question on that, Olivia.
Have a question? Oh, go ahead, George.
Yeah, going back to Mayor Boyles, I really like that idea. My question is, I'm afraid I'm going to ask, I know the answer probably, but because each city may have the different preferences when we do this. And I'm wondering, what was your vision with respect to participation? Because if it's only me participating, I may not represent, each person in city attorneys council may be a little different. That's really, I'm trying to say, how do we do this? Any thoughts about that? I don't know, with any other cities as well.
Madam Chair, do you want me to answer that?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, George, that I think, you know your city fairly well. Like, for example, you might say, look, coyotes are a major problem for us. We want to continue to advocate for that. We want the COG to do that, as an example that's relevant and recent for your city. And for example, El Segundo might say, we're working really hard on our structural financial deficit, and we want to continue to explore pension reform and OPEB reform. And it's really about, as a collective group, whoever shows up, be it the steering committee, being it the entire board of directors, it's going to be open to anyone, that they represent collectively what they think their city would want, what the intent of their city is. And I think that we have a lot more in common amongst us than we do different, especially if you think about some of the things that we're already doing, you know, with regards to the environment and homelessness and housing and transportation. So doesn't mean we might not change anything. I think if we, at the very least, got some 1 or 2 metrics per strategic priority, like how do we know we've been successful with housing, for example? How does a COG know in 3 years from now that we've actually made a difference when it comes to housing? I couldn't answer that right now. So if we just got some quantifiable, measurable outcomes out of this exercise, I think it would be a huge win.
Yeah, I agree with you. My suggestion was actually this, and I'll be more specific. Maybe is that we put the invite to all the elected, knowing that it might just be me for Torrance, but at least they have a chance. It's not like that. That's all really I was getting at. But I know that having everybody show up, it would not be effective. It was just a thought.
I would tell you that Jamie, who's facilitating, is which the COG's not going to pay for. If he does charge us, I'm going to be funding that. But Jamie is a pro, and I've seen him facilitate meetings of boards up to 18 people, which is pretty unruly. So I think even if we had a really good turnout, it would be fine. He'd be able to distill through that.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was just getting at. You know, at least we let all the elected know about it. It's kind of like when we had that police discussion, you know, more people showed up because there was an interest. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Are there any other questions concerning the work program? All right, let's talk about the legislative visits and advocacy.
Okay, we've stopped pretty much doing our visits, and now we're doing, as you all know, we're doing this letter. And I can call on Christian and Stacy and Drew have sort of taken the lead on the letter that you all received. At this point, I can just say I have 78 mayors and council members from 30 cities throughout the region. We have one Northern California city, but otherwise they're all from Southern California. And I wanted to, Christian or Stacy or both, to talk about what we're going to be doing with all of this.
Yeah. So thanks everyone, and thanks Jackie for kind of managing this for everyone since Sunday. I do want to say I appreciate the feedback we got very quickly on Father's Day from people, and as a result, we did make revisions to the op-ed, which, you know, make it not only stronger, but I think kind of consolidate it and make sure that it's a completely bipartisan issue in speaking to the governor. At this point, we are trying to get everybody's signature, ideally from the South Bay, so that it's a unanimous support letter. And then Drew, Stacy are working also at the regional levels through SCAG and ICA or contract cities to see if we can garner more support. So if anybody knows anybody, please reach out to them. We would love to get their signatures in support of this. And so there's a few of you on here who haven't signed on that I did contact today in one way or another. Please let us know before the meeting's over if you are willing to have your name added to that. What we are trying to do is, and thanks to Drew, we've sent off a draft of it to the LA Times, not through the normal way of just kind of sending it into a black box. He did put us in direct touch with their lead opinion editor, who then CC'd 2 of their staff members. We haven't had any feedback yet, but I will probably ask Drew maybe to do a subtle follow-up tomorrow, you know, give them a couple days. And, you know, the goal here is to get it into a Sunday edition. If not this Sunday, maybe the following Sunday, sooner than later. The secondary option is to run it as a full page ad in a periodical. We got pricing for the LA Times, and that pricing was astronomical, and I wouldn't ask anybody to chip in for that. But Colleen has also gotten pricing for the Daily Breeze, which is much more economical. And I think she mentioned we have some credits as a COG that we could apply to that funding as well. So those are our two paths forward in terms of getting it out there publicly, clearly. We will also have, I have the letter right now on my own blog, but we can put it on the COG site, and then we really should be sharing it, and using digital media as a way to just get it out there. I want to hold off on that until I know whether or not it does get printed as an op-ed, because the LA Times specifically limits op-eds to them. So if we were going to share something digitally, we want to wait and see if they ran it first and then share that. That would be the biggest bang for our buck. So we've got a few different strategies going forward. And then finally, I would say the third tranche is that we will send the letter directly to the governor's office as well with all the signatures. So I would just ask everyone, please, anybody through any organization that you are affiliated with, reach out to them via phone, text, or email, and send them a copy of the letter. And ask them if they'd be willing to sign on and support. I think that would be the best that we could do as a group collectively. And that's it, unless Stacy has anything else to add.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us this time to speak about it. I just wanted to thank Jackie and Wally. Jackie has done a terrific job getting out many versions of the letter and trying to coordinate all the endorsements. Thank you so much. And this letter would be empty without Wally and the research he has put together that allowed Christian certainly to do the lion's share of the work in putting the letter together. So I just wanted to really extend our gratitude to both Jackie and Wally for their work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have just a very brief question, and that's about the timing. How much time do we have to get this to the governor's office before he would be signing that bill?
Well, based on Jeff Kiernan's feedback, it passed out of the Housing Committee on, I think it was Wednesday, Stace. And he said it's going to the Appropriations Committee, and I don't know if there's any other committees it needs to go to before it would go to the Assembly floor. So we have I think plenty of time before it goes back to the Senate, and then depending on if the Assembly makes any changes to it, then they have to kind of go through that process of balancing that out. But clearly we want to get a jump on this, and so we're trying to get this to the governor regardless of when it's coming out of the legislature, to kind of put that message out there, and ideally just get that message out there to more people to make them aware of what the implications are for residents of the state of California with the bill.
So would you say 2 weeks or less?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, clearly Jackie is raising her hand there. It really depends on if the LA Times is wanting to run it. And if not, then I think Colleen, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was like a 2 to 4 day turnaround in terms of running it as an ad. So we need to kind of wait and hear. And I'm hoping maybe with Drew's Connect at the LA Times that'll help us maybe have a little more insight than if we blindly submitted it to the general op-ed email address.
All right, thank you. Jackie?
I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, the governor actually has till September 30th to veto it if it gets through the Assembly. So what we're doing now is probably putting pressure on Assembly members. But if it gets to the governor, it won't get to him till sometime in August. So I think it's important to get the letter done rapidly, but as far as the governor's, how much time he's got plenty of time. The other thing I wanted to say is it's not, the LA Times will probably, I can't imagine they're going to publish the signatures. We have 72 signatures. So or 74. What we decided to do, and I don't want anybody to be surprised, is at the end of the letter, we list the fact that there are 70 whatever council members from X number of cities, and that their names will appear on the link. And we're going to put the link of the COG there so that people can go and see the actual names on a link, because no paper is going to take that much space. So I wanted to let you know that, so your name wouldn't get in the paper. Probably it will just be on a link.
But
Thank you.
Olivia, just to tag on that with Jackie, if for some reason we didn't get it as an op-ed and we ran it as an ad, we would then be able to print all those names.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. B, you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's great that we're trying to hit the governor and asking him to veto, but I don't want people who read this, citizens who otherwise would feel like they need to contact their state representatives to vote against this, to think that somehow this is passed through and now it's on the governor's desk, because not everybody's as well versed about the timelines for the state legislature and when it gets to the governor. Is there any problem in revising the letter further just to make reference to the fact that we're also urging the state legislature to not pass this bill, and as well as the governor to veto it, so that people know they still have their right to petition their state elected representatives to get them not to vote in favor of it?
I think the letter actually addresses, it's addressing the governor. It's an open letter to him, but it addresses the legislature in many of the points that are being brought up. So it could easily be used as a tool with any assembly or Senate member at this point in time to try to get them to make subtle revisions to SB 9 or to change their position on it.
Well, I'm just asking, just a few lines or maybe a few words could be used just to say, we urge the legislature not to pass this bill, and the governor, if it is passed, to veto it. You know, in other words, so it just makes it clear that this is still going through the legislature, and we're so that nobody feels like they shouldn't, the time has passed already for them to contact their legislative reps. That's all.
And not to belabor the point, B, but I would just say that there are so many organizations and angles that have been, including the league, that have been directly petitioning the legislature. Our group that was meeting with people kind of had a sub meeting and decided that we needed to also start on this angle early. So I think there's plenty of groups that are doing that. We are clearly doing that as a body as well, but this angle was meant to get a jump on it potentially passing the legislature.
Madam Chair, if I could just.
Yes, please, go ahead.
B, I think B, you bring up a really good point, because it's not a foregone conclusion, although many of us maybe think otherwise, just knowing better, right, that this will likely move forward, but we still have a chance of it not passing. So I know Jackie was concerned about changing the substantive language of the letter again, because we've done that now a couple times and it's had to be recirculated. But we're putting a link at the end of the letter directly to the language in the letter and the full list of supporters. So maybe when we put the letter online, we can include that language as an action item for folks. And if this does get printed in the LA Times, I suspect a lot of people will be going to that link to see the full list of endorsements and potential ways where they can do more. So.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Okay, Jackie, let's move on to GIS, sir.
No, I was just going to say what the item on the agenda is for is as an action item so that we can post it on our site. And I want to just say that since it hasn't been determined about whether you're going to do an ad or not, and that will probably need to be done, I do have authority to spend $600 or $700, which I think is what our credit is with the Daily Breeze. I will assume if you vote to support this letter that I would have the authority to use that credit. But unless you want to include that in the motion. But there would be no time for me to come back to you, so I would use that authority. So I just wanted to say that we need a motion to approve the letter and so that it can post it on the website.
All right, may we have a motion to approve the letter?
So moved. Tanaka.
Second?
Second.
Oh, sorry, B got me.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Go for it.
May we have a reverse roll call?
Any opposition to approving the letter? Any abstentions?
Yes, David, I will abstain.
All
Okay.
right, thank you. GIS services for member cities.
Okay, we're very excited about this, and I'm going to let Kim, the steering committee approved this item, and we're asking for your approval. And I'd like it, Kim, are you there? Can you, do you want to explain this? Because this is Kim's brainchild.
Sure, sure. And actually Chandler has done a lot of work on this as well, and he can answer any technical questions. But what we have been finding in meeting with city staff, not only with GIS staff, but other types of staff, like planning department, for example, is that there seems to be a greater need, ongoing greater need to have more GIS services for cities. And some cities, of course, have their own dedicated GIS staff. Many cities have no GIS staff. And what we're trying to do is find a way that we can provide those services to the cities and also add value to the cities that do have the GIS services, but may need like one-time mapping or something like that that they might need to do because they're low on staff. Excuse me. And then, so what we thought is if we could create a dollar value for our staff to do this, and it would be at the $78 value that cities could pay for these services, and it would be something that we could do for the cities, as well as provide a minimum amount of hours so that cities could just access it with no cost. It would be an added benefit to being a member of the COG. And we've been doing some of these kinds of technical services on some of our contracts, such as West Basin. Chandler's been doing rain barrel, using this tool to do rain barrel services and RSVPs and things like that. So what we're asking you today is, would you approve us moving forward with providing these services at the rate of $78 with a 20-hour a year minimum cap that cities could access at no cost?
Is there any discussion on this?
Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
I was just going to mention that one of our budget requests is a GIS analyst in Hermosa Beach. So we may have an opportunity to eliminate that as an obligation from the city and utilize the services provided by this GIS analyst. So it already would have a benefit, certainly for our city.
Wonderful. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And may we have reverse roll call?
Any opposition to approving the item? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Moving on to the South Bay Fiber Network.
Tonight, you approved 2 more sites in the city of Lomita and also the Regional Communications Center to be added, which now gives us a public safety component to our fiber network. And I'm delighted to say that the LA City Council yesterday approved adding Wilmington and San Pedro. So Councilman Buscaino, I think it's 3 facilities, his city hall and a site, the community center in Wilmington, the community center in San Pedro. So we are now connecting, if that goes through, we're going to be connecting to the city of LA as well. And that will be really all of our cities. So the fiber network is moving on. There's a lot of federal and state money. And we had a lot of information presented. It was very, very dense. We send it out to the city managers and the IT directors so that people can start looking at what ways they might be able to access some of the federal and state money. And we're looking at ways we can help cities. If your cities have questions, we have a Magellan advisors on a consultant basis. They are experts, and we're trying to figure out ways we can be more answer more questions that you might have through Magellan too. So now's the time to make it come alive. And with Steve's help at Metro and Jim Butts, we're going to be able to spend some of our Measure M dollars on that as well. So that's that report.
That's really good news, Jackie. All right, well, does anyone have any comments or questions on that? Homeless services next.
I'm going to call on Grace Farwell. Grace?
Hey, good evening, everybody. So I guess the first order of business is to approve the LA County Homeless Services, well, the contract amendment. And it's actually an extension to carry us through the end of the calendar year with our innovation funds and then also with our coordination services.
Let me explain the reason it's on this part of the agenda and not the consent calendar is that it did not come to us in time for the steering committee. And so I don't bring anything that hasn't gone to the steering committee. I don't put that on the consent calendar. I did announce at the steering committee that we probably would be getting this contract, but it is an extension. Thank you, Grace.
So that one's an action item.
All right. Is there any question? Are there any questions or discussions for Grace about the contract extension? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. May we have the reverse roll call?
Any opposition to approving the contract? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Call for projects. Grace, I think you're still up.
Yep. So that one, we actually, it was presented at the steering committee and also has been, was presented at the city managers meeting, but this is essentially, this document is, and it's also been sent out to all of our city contacts within all of our cities who work on homelessness issues. But this is actually a draft call for projects for the next funding round for the Measure H funding. And this will carry us from January 2022 through June 30th of 2023. And so the reason we're sending it out as early as we are, because the deadline for returning the applications is August 10th. And although this has not been formally approved by the LA County Board of Supervisors, originally it was on, it was to be approved July 6th. Then we learned that because of the holiday that the Board of Supervisors are not meeting until the 13th of July. So we wanted to really make sure that our cities has had as much time as possible to put together applications to be submitted to the COG. And I also just want to clarify that, congratulations to Torrance for passing on Tuesday evening their homelessness plan and their plan to put in pallet shelters, interim housing. Currently, right now, they're looking at the Civic Center, but I know the council directed staff to look at other locations as well. But there was an article in the Daily Breeze that seemed to allude that to receiving $1.9 million of the COG funds. And so I've already had one city reach out to me today asking if that was, is that true? Is Torrance getting all the money, or was that a mistake in the paper? And so I assured the city that yes, it was a mistake by the paper, and this is a competitive grant. And I know Torrance is going to be applying for some funds, but I certainly hope that some of our other cities will also be applying for funds to further the whole cause and further our finding solutions for homelessness in the South Bay. So I think that's it for that one. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that HUD has released emergency housing vouchers, and these are tenant-based rental assistance under the Housing Choice Voucher Program through the American Rescue Plan. And these vouchers are actually good through 2030. And so our we have 4 local housing authority departments that will have control over the distribution of these vouchers in their areas. Hawthorne, Inglewood, Redondo Beach, and Torrance. And then other cities will need to go through the LA County Development Department for their residents to apply for these housing choice vouchers. But the eligible populations, the priority level A, group 1, is those who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence situations or human trafficking. Priority area or priority level A, group 2, are those who are currently housed and enrolled in rental assistance programs such as rapid rehousing, recovery rehousing, shallow subsidy, and then also those who are currently at interim housing sites such as Project Room Key or Project Home Key that are closing, those who are long-term enrollment in interim housing over 3 months, and those who are connected with the service provider and receiving case management services through the coordinated entry system. Priority level B are those who are recently homeless, and priority level C are those who are at risk of homelessness and are currently receiving or have received prevention services. And so there's no case management services that are attached to these emergency housing vouchers. So they're really looking for those individuals with a low acuity score. And so as of July 1, all of the program will start, and that's when these housing vouchers can begin to be given out. LAHSA has a soft deadline in that they want 90% of the vouchers committed by September 30th of 2022. But the hard deadline is September 30th of 2023 to issue all the vouchers, and then the program sunsets in September of 2030. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention with homeless issues is that we recently started a SPA 8 older adult homeless services cross-sector convening. So really looking at issues related to homelessness and also issues related to seniors. And so I'm trying to figure out if this is something that we can provide updates to the COG SPA 8 working group, because we're really taking a deeper dive to looking at homelessness issues and seniors and how they impact seniors. So I think that's it that I have for homeless.
Grace, I have a question for you about the call for projects. What is your deadline for receiving applications?
August 10th. And then the plan is that we will review them and bring them back to the Homeless Services Task Force meeting the first Wednesday of September, and then bring them to the steering committee the second Monday of September, because we have to get our draft statement of work back to the county by September 20th, I believe. Yes.
So if a city wants to work with you and get some assistance on submitting an application, are you the person the city should contact, or is there someone else?
It would be me until.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay. It would be me at this point. Yes.
Grace, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, so the article did make it sound like Torrance is going to spend a lot of money every year for these 40 tiny houses to maintain them. They talked about $3,000 a month per little tiny house. And of course, the article did make it look like they were going to get the entirety of the funds available to the COG. How much would you give to an individual city that made an application?
Well, I think the bottom line is we do have the roughly $1.9 million. And I think we would try to determine how many cities would be applying for that money, and then looking at what their, what the projects would be, and then make a determination. I mean, if no other city applies for the money and Torrance is the only one, then we would definitely, want to give it to Torrance. But I know, and the last go around with the innovation funds, we had a couple of cities that put in multiple applications, and we only funded like one of the application of the, one of the 3 or 4 that were submitted. So we don't have a cap. I know that's your bottom line question is we don't have a cap right now because
Well,
we
that's
want to
good.
see what.
Okay, and that's good. And so if nobody but Torrance put it in for it, we'd give it all of them. We wouldn't let it go to waste.
Oh yeah, no, definitely not. Definitely not.
And is there a date by which the funds have to be obligated before there's a danger of the grant funds being returned?
Well, the funding would end in June of 2023, but it would be committed as of January 1st of 2022. So I think the bottom line is even if a city isn't ready to, if they're not shovel ready or, have the program ready to go right off the bat, January 1st, as long as we had a timeline of what the plans are, then I think that is definitely acceptable.
Can this money be used to
And
purchase housing vouchers?
That's a good question. Let me find out and I will respond back to you.
Because you'll have a lot of cities that will put in for it if it can be.
Madam Chair, can Grace just go on and give the very, very brief senior report? And then that will be her item.
Sure.
Okay, and then with the seniors, our next scheduled meeting is on July. Oh, and that's the other thing with the Homeless Services Task Force. Our next meeting is July 7th. And so I will be sending out the agenda. I hope tomorrow. I just had a change. I had invited a city to come give an update on a motel conversion study that they're doing, and they just canceled on me today. So I'm doing a little quick change on what we're doing with the homeless task force meeting. But with seniors, our next senior services working group meeting is scheduled for July 27th. And again, we're really focusing on really trying to get our cities to become age friendly. And so I had a meeting last week with El Segundo. I talked verbally with Carson, and I'm really excited that Carson is ready to potentially take that leap. And I know Torrance is exploring it with their Commission on Aging. So I'm really excited about that.
So I want to just complete this item by saying that the South Bay COG has been incredibly fortunate to have somebody of Grace's caliber working on both seniors and homeless issues. We didn't know a thing about either one. Grace has a degree in gerontology. She has hit the ground running on homeless. You can all see where we've come with the cities and the homeless programs we've been able to institute. And I say all this because for reasons which are unfathomable to me, Grace is leaving us, and she will be, her last day will be July 15th. And we will be putting out a job description probably next week. And I hope you will join with me in thanking her, because I know that we could never have gotten to where we are on those two projects without Grace and all of the work she's done in the past on energy efficiency and water conservation. So it's going to be a real loss. We can't pretend it isn't. And we're going to try really hard to find someone to fill those shoes, although, I mean, to fill the position, but we'll never be able to fill her shoes. So Grace, thank you so much.
Thank you, Grace. Yes, please. I reiterate what Jackie just said. We are very grateful for all your service to the COG.
Well, thank you. It was a very difficult decision to make. So it's, and I've really enjoyed my time at the COG and working and getting to know all of our elected officials. I just admire the work that you all do in moving our cities forward.
And please read the comments in chat, because people are writing in chat and sending you messages. So please read them.
Thank you.
If we go on the next item, I would like to call on Stacy to talk about the SPA 8 working group.
Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Madam Chair. Since I don't believe I have my partner in health, Hildy, for this item, I will go ahead and present it. we have formed a service planning area, SPA 8 work group. The members of the work group and, really a huge lift was done by Beach Cities Health District to help facilitate this. So I want to really, really thank them for their work. But we have Jackie as a member of the work group, myself, Hildy, Jim Butts, Rodney Tanaka, Eric Allegria, who John did agree to participate. Thank you for the recommendation. We didn't say that you said anything. We have the city manager of El Segundo, Scott Mitnick. We have Tom Backley, and we have some Beach Cities Health District staff. And we'll have representatives from Supervisor Hunt's office, Supervisor Mitchell's office, and of course, Lindsay Lastra and possibly more of her staff from the LA County Department of Public Health, SPA 8. Just really quickly to go over the purpose and goals of the work group. It's to improve the health and well-being outcomes in SPA 8 neighborhoods, cities, and communities, improve communication between our South Bay cities, local agencies, and the LA County SPA 8, create opportunities for regional collaboration and community awareness of health and well-being issues, and minimize duplication of efforts and maximize our opportunities and health. And our next steps are we're sharing this work plan with LA County. They're getting back to us, and then we'll set up a date for our inaugural meeting, and I'll have more to report at a future meeting.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments or questions for Stacy? Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Next is media coverage.
No, we have the request from Torrance, which is very, very brief. Torrance has requested, City of Torrance has requested that we, the COG, coordinate regional coyote management, education, and information. The steering committee discussed it. John Cruikshank offered the City of Rancho Palos Verdes to take the lead, and I have been in conversations with both Ara Moranian, who's the city manager of Rancho Palos Verdes, and Aram Chaparian, who's the city manager in Torrance. They're going to be discussing this further at the city managers meeting, and I will have more information at the next meeting. But at this point, I would ask that you formally decline for the COG to take the lead and that we work with Rancho Palos Verdes.
Do we have consensus on that? I don't think we need to take a vote.
No, but can I make a point of clarity, Jackie? Our city is definitely willing to take the lead. Ultimately, though, the document needs to be all the cities, not just Rancho Palos Verdes, on the cover of the document, because if it's going to be a regional approach, then we need all the cities to help participate. And of course, Torrance has a pretty robust coyote program, so it's great that they're working with us as well. But we hope to learn from all the cities in the South Bay COG, because I know all cities are doing something and there's something to learn for all of them. And I think it'd be neat at the end of the day if we could get the GIS analyst to actually build out a robust coyote mapping system for all of us so we can watch the migration as they move toward Redondo Beach.
We welcome them with open arms, and we'll have pallet shelters ready and waiting.
Very nice.
Madam Chair, could I interject for a second?
Yes, please.
Now, I have logged on from home. My desktop didn't connect and my phone didn't connect. And now I'm on my laptop. But it's my understanding from Drew Boyles that there was some discussion about the Metro connector. And I didn't know if you had a question for me, or I don't know if that was discussed.
I don't think we did discuss it.
About a half an hour ago.
No, Jim, we were thanking you for your leadership with the modernization changes that Metro approved for use of, for Measure R&M funds.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. Well, I never like to miss a compliment either. Okay, so thank you.
Do you have any comments that you would like to make, Jim?
As it relates to, well, you know, we had a Metro meeting today, and the biggest item was item 17, and it was about the repurposing of the Measure Our Highway funds that we took such great advantage of, you know, that I introduced last year. And other cities now want to do what we've done. And that was a really big thing in today's meeting.
Thank you. All right. So I guess we're now at the point where we talk about the
We're at media coverage.
media coverage. Okay.
And I wanted Colleen Farrell is our newest employee, as you know, and she's been doing a great job of placing things in social media and getting stories. And so I just wanted her to give a very, very brief report, since I know we're late. Colleen?
Sure. Let me just share my screen here. So we have been building some buzz for our proposed local travel network and the benefits of micromobility. And we created and distributed a press release about that. And as you can see here, we got some coverage with the Daily Breeze that ran on page 3 local section. And then we also placed a story with the Spectrum News 1 digital site. And that was written by Susan Carpenter. And then we also had a story that ran on Torrance City Cable. So I'm just going to play that real quick. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
We can't hear the dialogue though.
But it's
Okay.
powerful.
Let me try this again.
If it, I know we're running late, so I'm a little worried. Do you want to just say the things that we're doing? Because I don't know that we have time for this.
Let me just play the KNX clip real quick.
We can't hear it. Are you playing it? Because we can't hear anything.
You can't hear anything?
No.
No.
So
Okay.
why don't you just list the things we've done?
Okay, yeah, so we had a placement with KNX radio and also on Torrance City Cable and the Daily Breeze and Spectrum News 1. So we're definitely generating some buzz for the local travel network, and now we just need to get some funding. So
Yeah. So, and we've had several different social media bites that Colleen has done on that and many other issues. So I hope you'll like us and join us and all that kind of stuff. So thank you, Colleen. I think she's made a big difference in our exposure in the area. So now we're down to the last item.
Okay. So now we're at the point where we discuss our election of officers. And so I want you to turn to pages 124 through 126 if you haven't already done so. So at this point, I need to let you know that we are not going to be having, the election will not be covering the steering committee. It will only be covering the chair, the first vice chair, and the second vice chair, because at the steering committee meeting, it was voted, and you can read all the details on pages 124 and 125. It was voted to choose option 3, at which it was voted that we would remove at-large members and encourage all delegates and alternates to attend when they can. So there will no longer be the 4 at-large steering committee members, which we had recommended originally when the nominating committee met. So that's out. There'll be no at-large nominees. So what you're voting on tonight, and the first thing I want to say is I'm going to ask for nominations from the floor, but what you're voting on are the chair, the first vice chair, and the second vice chair. And the nominating committee had recommended Chair Drew Boyles, Mayor of El Segundo, first vice chair John Cruikshank, council member Rancho Palos Verdes, second vice chair Cedric Hicks, council member Carson. Are there any nominations from the floor?
I would move that slate. I don't think we can do any better.
Pardon me?
I want to move that slate, Jim Butts.
Thank you. All right, it's been moved and seconded that the slate be approved.
I'll second it.
All right, may we have a reverse roll call?
Any opposition to approving the slate of officers? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Don't screw up, Drew.
Thank you. And so at this time,
Congratulations, Drew.
Congratulations, Drew. And at this time, I'm going to ask Drew to address the group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you very much. I look forward to working with all of you and John and Cedric very closely. But most importantly, Olivia, we want to take some time here. Unfortunately, we're not in person, so it's not quite the same, but you just will have to imagine the fanfare and the cake and everything else that we would normally experience. But we want to thank you for your leadership during this extraordinarily unique year. I don't think you could have had a more unique year to lead in your city and with the COG. And I think we all have something unique to offer. And as chair of the COG, we've all really enjoyed working with you, Olivia, your willingness to address important issues. I can think of a couple. One was in light of the George Floyd tragedy, you quickly asked the COG to take on use of force and really understanding our police departments with the help of Mayor Jim Butts, former police officer, and others. And that was a great exercise. And I know there's more work to do and to be done there. There was a lot of requests for looking into our own health department, which is still coming up even tonight. Councilman Chen brought that up, and you mobilized staff to help us look into the feasibility of setting up our own health department. And then the major accomplishments, the South Bay Fiber Ring Network, we got that set up. I know in our council meeting last week, we had the shovel in hand. It was awesome. We celebrated that. Thank you for that. We completed the COG Local Travel Network study, and we're making great progress there. We advanced a bunch of projects for Measure R and Measure M funds. We launched the Home Share South Bay program under your leadership, and we're still advocating for local control and South Bay land use housing priorities. So thank you for all that. And then you really advocated for the South Bay businesses and ensuring that the economy continued to move forward despite the pandemic. And then you facilitated a General Assembly. First time we've done that virtually, did a great job there. And I don't know how much, we really appreciate this, but we relocated the South Bay COG office too, in light of all this. And we haven't even quite experienced that yet, but that's happened as well. So we've got a plaque. Jackie, is there a visual of, oh yeah, there you go. Look at that, that's awesome.
Thank you.
And thank you for everything that you've done. I know we all really appreciate all of your work, and there's gonna be a scrapbook that you'll get if you haven't gotten it already. Jackie, has that been sent to you by Chandler Shields? Awesome.
I have. Yes.
Great. And I think there's also a cupcake delivered to you.
Oh, that was the absolute bomb. They were wonderful. Yes.
Awesome. And thank you. Please accept all those gifts with the COG's gratitude. And also you have commendations recognizing your leadership on the board from U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein, Congressman Ted Lieu, State Senator Ben Allen, State Senator Stephen Bradford, State Senator Sidney Kamlagar, Assembly Member Mike Gibson, Assembly Member Patrick O'Donnell, LA County Supervisor Janice Hahn. Then you've got also cities of Los Angeles, Redondo Beach, Hermosa Beach, El Segundo, Inglewood, Lawndale, Lomita, Manhattan Beach, Palos Verdes Estates, Rancho Palos Verdes, Rolling Hills Estates, Carson, and Torrance. So thank you so much, Olivia. You did a great job. It's been a pleasure to work with you. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Olivia.
Yes.
You really did a fantastic job, you know.
Oh, thank you so much.
Shared a lot of things, but see now though, it's mandatory that you hang every one of those proclamations, and we have to see them in your office when you come.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. So I just want to say, it's hard to believe that this is the end of my tenure as chair of the COG. And this is bittersweet. I have loved being chair of the COG, even in the midst of a pandemic. I'm just going to reflect on what was said in the beginning of the foreword to my souvenir book. It says, "A year like no other, the first ever and hopefully last year of all virtual meetings, events, and programs of the South Bay Council of Governments." But even in the midst of a pandemic, I have loved being your leader. Thank you to all my colleagues for your certificates and messages of praise. We accomplished a lot, all of us together, because of your tireless dedication to the betterment of your cities and to working collaboratively to achieve the mission of the South Bay COG and the enhancement of quality of life in this region. Just to name a few of our accomplishments, I don't want to even go back over what Drew said because he did it so eloquently. I want to just emphasize a couple of things. The execution of the core ring of the South Bay Fiber Network was critical. The holding the public safety forums to improve dialogue between the council members and their police departments. Those are things that I really, they're really close to my heart. Launching the local travel network. And of course, working with Councilman Christian Horvath, who actually was the spirit, was the leader of the General Assembly, and working with him and working with all of you to make that a reality. We did it all in the midst of a pandemic. I just can't believe it, but it was just a wonderful achievement. Thank you, Jackie, for your leadership and your remarkable staff for excellent policy guidance. To Steve, to Wally, to Grace, to Kim, everybody who just pitches in and just gives us so much assistance and help whenever we need it, and helps us create great policy for the COG. Thank you. Special thanks to the following people for personal assistance to me. Natalie for keeping me abreast of the calendar. David for his patience in providing me with technical assistance, and I needed a lot of it. Thank you, David. To Brooke for making it easy for me to sign the invoices by coming to my office. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to passing the baton to Drew, who is also a great colleague to work with. And thank you all again. Have a wonderful summer, and I will be back and ready to be working with you under new leadership. And I know we're just gonna do great things together and continue to make the South Bay a great place to live, work, and raise a family. Thank you all.
Thank you. Olivia, I just had to say this. Thank you for all of your leadership, and thank you for what you have done. You know, we always just used to sit together when we were not in virtual time. So when I'm looking at us on the Zoom, and I always look at how the pictures kind of vacillate back and forth, and every now and then we get back together again. So at one point in time, in person, we'll be back sitting next to each other.
Yes,
and I just want to
indeed.
say this: preparation and opportunity place you in the right place at the right time. And even though the pandemic might have came at this point in time, you were the right person to lead us through that process. And I thank you for it.
Thank you for your help and your leadership and your assistance. So with that, I think the only thing, couple of things we have left, agency reports, we're not going to have them. The oral reports will only be made to clarify or amplify written attachments, and there have been no attachments received for these agencies. Upcoming events and announcements. July 8th is the legislative briefing. Unfortunately, I will not be here. I will be out of town between the 7th and the 16th of July. But July 8th, put that on your calendar, everyone. And board meetings, it was a consensus of the steering committee that board meetings will stay virtual until August. And in August, we will start meeting in person again. And I can't wait to get to our new office building, which I have seen, but I can't wait to have a meeting in there. And with that, unless there's something else, if anyone has any announcements or comments, questions, or anything else they'd like to say, other than that, yes?
Can I just mention, Ted
Please.
Lieu has confirmed that he will be at our legislative breakfast. So I hope that, legislative briefing, excuse me. So I hope that you will Zoom with us on July 8th.
Thank you all.
I had one question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Was Jackie able to fill all the slots for the tour for SoFi?
Yes, so far we have 15. One is a tentative, but we do have 15 at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your efforts. It's hard to coordinate that many people.
And Madam President, to Christian and to Stacy, I just wanted to publicly let you know that Mayor Lula Davis Holmes, along with myself, are signing on to the SB1 opposition.
Consider.
SB9.
SB9.
SB9. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you.
You didn't like one either.
I'll take his road money.
All right, thank you all. Next board meeting is Thursday, July 22nd. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you,
Olivia.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Olivia.
Happy 4th.
Happy 4th to all of you.
Bye. Thank you.
Congratulations, Drew.